Rain hammered the front windows of St. Jude's Medical Center. Outside the parking lot, lights smeared into red and white streaks on the glass. Inside the emergency department, the air was bright and dry sharp with antiseptic and coffee. Nora Hayes walked the main corridor with a plastic supply tray tucked against her hip. Her sneakers whispered on the waxed floor. At the nurse's station, faces glowed in the light of monitors. A muted television showed a weather map no one watched. She set the tray down, signed a line on a clipboard, and checked an IV rack. Every bag hung straight. Her hands were quick and economical. Snap of gloves, tug of tape, a blanket smoothed flat. Hayes' Trauma 3 stocked, a nurse asked without looking away from her screen. Yes, Nora said. The nurse nodded and kept typing. Nora moved on. She slid a warmed blanket over a sleeping man's shoulders and shifted an IV pole so a woman would not have to twist her arm to reach it. Work that only drew notice when it was not done. The automatic doors sighed open. Cold, damp air drifted into the corridor. A man stepped in from the sidewalk, shoulders hunched in a soaked army coat. Water dripped from the hem and spotted the tile. He paused under the fluorescent lights. His beard was uneven and gray. His eyes flicked around the room, never settling. Evening, sir, the receptionist said. You here to be seen? He nodded one short jerk of his chin. Name. He seemed to search for it. Jennings, he said at last. Just Jennings. His voice was rough and tired. The receptionist typed printed wrapped a band around his wrist. You can sit over there, she said, pointing to the row of chairs against the wall. We will get you in. He turned away from the desk. From where she stood at the supply cabinet, Nora watched his reflection in the glass door. His shoulders sagged. One hand dragged lightly along the wall as he walked. His chest rose too fast for the slow shuffle of his steps. He took 2 steps toward the chairs. On the third, his knees folded. One moment he was upright. The next he dropped. The back of his head smacked the floor with a crack that cut through the low hum of the ER. His arms jerked. His heels scraped lines on the tile. A chair tipped over. Somewhere behind Nora, a metal tray crashed. Code in the hallway, someone yelled. Crash cart. For an instant, everyone hesitated. Nora did not. She slid the tray aside and went to her knees. Cold from the floor seeped through her scrub pants. Jennings' eyes had rolled back, showing thin crescents of white. Foam clung at the corner of his mouth. She pressed 2 fingers into his neck. No pulse. Monitor, she said. The portable unit bumped against the wall as it was dragged closer. The screen sprang to life. A green line lay flat across the glass, heart rate 0. Nora placed the heel of her right hand in the center of his chest. The left settled over it. She lined up her shoulders, locked her elbows, and pushed. There was a dull crackle under her palms. She did not stop. She drove his sternum down again, then again, finding the depth and rhythm. Down, up, hard, fast, steady. Her breathing stayed even. The hallway filled with noise. Rubber wheels squealed. Gloves snapped. Hayes easier, a nurse said over her head. You are going to crack something. She kept counting in her head. 22, 23, 24. Dr. Jonah Reed pushed through the knot of staff white coat flaring over navy scrubs. What is this? He demanded. His coffee cup landed on the counter behind him with a dull thud. Hayes, you are way too aggressive. Back off and let respiratory in. He reached toward her shoulder. On the monitor, the flat line twitched. Nora finished the 30th compression and paused just long enough to tilt Jennings' head, pinch his nose, and seal the mask they had handed her over his mouth. 2 slow breaths. Chest rise, chest fall. Her hands dropped back to the same spot on his sternum and began again, the rhythm unchanged. That is not how we teach CPR, Reed said. Irritation sharpened his words. You are not running this code. The respiratory therapist slid in at the man's head, bag in hand, but stopped for a second. Her gaze flicked to the screen. The line trembled a second time. A small spike broke the green flatness. The monitor gave a tentative beep, then another. Reed looked up. The numbers at the corner of the screen climbed from 0 to 12 to 19. Hold, the therapist said quietly. Nora slowed, then stopped. 2 fingers at Jennings's neck felt a weak thump. His chest rose on its own with a ragged inhale. Return of circulation, the therapist said. Reed let out a breath. Lucky, he said. Those compressions were too strong. Radiology is going to count ribs. A nurse near the doorway whispered. He was gone less than a minute. Reed did not answer her. Move him. Labs had CT full workup, he said, already thinking ahead. They shifted Jennings onto a gurney, secured lines and oxygen, and wheeled him away from the glare of the hallway. The crowd thinned. The regular sounds of the ER flowed back into place. Nora pulled off her gloves. The latex peeled away from her wrists with a soft snap. Her bare hands looked paler without them. As she bent to set the fallen chair upright, her sleeve slid back an inch. A thin white scar along the inside of her forearm caught the light straight and precise, then disappeared again under cotton. Outside, the rain kept tapping against the glass, steady and indifferent. The rest of the shift tried to settle back into routine, though the hallway where Jennings had fallen seemed to hold a trace of his collapse in its scuff marks and taped outlines. Someone had mopped, but the floor still showed a faint dullness there, as if the wax had not quite recovered. Nora finished charting his code-ticking boxes with the same steady care she gave her compressions. She signed her initials at the bottom of the page. Small letters. Precise. Hayes, a voice called from behind the station. "We are out of saline and fast track. Can you restock it?" "On it," she said. It was always like that. While other nurses hovered in trauma rooms and argued over interesting cases, Nora moved in the background. Refill carts, swap out sharps containers, wipe blood from exam tables before the next patient arrived. All the small tasks that held the place together. In room 7, a teenage boy with a fractured wrist sat stiffly, eyes shining with tears he refused to let fall. His mother paced with her phone, pressed to her ear. A nurse passed by without slowing. Nora stepped in. "Hi," she said. "I am Nora. You doing all right?" The boy shrugged with his good shoulder. "It hurts," he admitted, "but I am fine." She checked the splint fingers, gentle, watching his face more than his arm. "You are allowed to say it hurts," she said. "They gave you something already." He nodded. "Good. It is working. You will sleep better tonight than the rest of us." That got a small snort, almost a laugh. She adjusted the sling so the strap would not dig into his neck. 2 quick tweaks, a smooth tuck of fabric, and he sighed without meaning to. "Better." "Yeah," he said. "Thanks." She stepped out before the mother even noticed she had been there. In the next corridor, a woman in a stained hoodie sat on a gurney in the corner, tucked half behind a supply cart. Her chart had a red sticker for no insurance. Her hair clung in damp streaks to her face. She picked at the edge of her blanket like she expected someone to pull it away. Nora checked the board. There was no name printed in the slot above the woman, just an ID number. She crossed the corridor and pulled the curtain half around the gurney, giving the woman a pocket of privacy. "Cold?" Nora asked. The woman nodded, eyes wary. "Let us fix that." Nora fetched a warm blanket from the cabinet and draped it over her, tucking in the edges as if the gurney were a bed. The woman's knuckles loosened under the fabric. "Someone will be with you soon," Nora said. "I will make sure you stay on the radar." "Do they even see me?" the woman whispered. Nora met her eyes. "I do," she said. No speech, no promise. Just 3 words and the light press of a hand on the blanket. Then she stepped back into the flow of the hallway. At the charge desk, 2 nurses leaned together over a schedule printout. Their voices were low, but sound carried in the midnight hush between monitor beeps. "Hayes volunteered for hallway duty again," one of them said. "She's going to burn herself out." "She likes it," the other replied. "And she's not exactly fast on her feet." "Let her take the simple cases." "Simple," the first nurse repeated with a small snort. If they were simple, they would be in primary care. They did not notice Nora behind the medicine cart pulling vials and checking labels. If she heard them, she gave no sign. Her face held the same calm focus. Thumb against glass. Count, check, return. She set a tray of labeled syringes on the counter without being asked, timed to land in front of a physician, just as he spun from a computer to place the order. He frowned at the tray, then at her. "You are reading my mind now?" he asked. "You clicked it 3 minutes ago," she answered. He grunted something that might have been thanks and reached for the first syringe. Near the back of the department, the staff lounge faced a side parking lot. The window there was narrower but high and long. Rain streaked down in bright ribbons under the fluorescent lights. Maya Lynn sat at one of the small round tables with a cup of coffee cupped in both hands. Her black hair was pulled into a loose knot at the base of her neck. A few strands escaped to tickle her cheek. She watched droplets race each other to the sill. She looked up when Nora stepped in with an empty tote. "You want the rest?" Maya asked, lifting her cup. "I made it too strong." Nora smiled. "I like it strong," she said. She took the cup, sipped, accepted the bitter heat without flinching. Maya watched her over the rim of her own cup. "You were fast out there," she said, "with Jennings." Nora shrugged one shoulder. "We are trained for it," she said. "That is the job." "Maybe. I have not seen anyone move like that in a while." Maya tilted her head. "You looked like you had done it 1,000 times." "Exact same way." Nora kept her eyes on the window. "That is good muscle memory, then," she replied. She lifted the tote onto the counter, a strap slipped, and she reached to catch it. Her sleeve slid up as she did. For a moment, the lounge light hit the inside of her forearm, brightening the pale line that ran along the muscle near the wrist. It was too straight for a random cut. Too clean. "Wow," Maya said softly. "That looks rough. What happened?" Nora glanced down, saw the scar, and tugged the sleeve back over it, as if just noticing. "Stupid lab accident," she said. "College. Glass beaker and a bad decision. They stitched it. It looks worse than it was." "You went pre-med?" Maya asked. "No." Nora rinsed out the empty cup, turned the tap, let the water run a moment. different path. Maya waited for more, but nothing came. The silence opened between them. It was not awkward. It simply held. On the wall beside the door, someone's phone buzzed, rattling against the laminate shelf. Somewhere in the hallway outside a monitor gave a 3-note alarm and then settled. Maya studied Nora as she dried her hands on a paper towel. Not the scar this time, but the way she moved. Nora never turned her back fully to the doorway. Even in the tiny lounge, she kept her shoulders at an angle, one eye on the hall. When a loud voice rose briefly from the nurse's station, her chin lifted, locating it, then eased when the tone dropped again. "You were military?" Maya asked. The question slipped out before she could stop it. Nora's hands paused on the towel, only for the space of a breath. Then she dropped it in the trash with a small rustle. "No," she said. "I like my nights quiet." Maya almost laughed. "This place," she said, "quiet." Nora gave a small smile that did not reach her eyes. "Quieter than some," she said. She picked up the empty tote, nodded to Maya, and stepped back into the corridor. From the break room doorway, Maya watched her go. Nora's gait was smooth and efficient, no wasted motion. She walked down the center of the hall, but whenever a patient's stretcher or a cart came toward her, she slid gently to the side, letting it pass, while keeping her line of sight open to both ends of the corridor. Nora paused at a doorway where a man in a paper gown gripped his bed rail, breathing fast. Without a word, she adjusted the oxygen clip on his finger, shifted the pillow behind his head, and checked the IV clamp. Her fingers closed the plastic with a soft click. The man's shoulders loosened. Rain rattled on the windows again, louder now. In the lounge, Maya leaned closer to the glass. Beyond the reflection of her own face and the bright rectangles of interior light, she could just make out the main parking area. Cars lined up in neat rows, their roofs shining wet. Near the far fence, where the light did not quite reach, a pair of headlamps glowed and then went dark. A shape sat in the shadowed corner, some larger vehicle with its silhouette blurred by the rain. It might have been a van or a truck or something taller, hard to say from this distance. She squinted, trying to sharpen it through the water streaks. The outline stayed indistinct. A gust pushed a sheet of rain across the glass and wiped the shape away. In the corridor, Nora turned another corner, hands already reaching for the next task, eyes taking in doors, faces exits in a single quiet sweep. By the time Nora came back from a quick hand wash, the waiting room had thickened with people. Wet jackets dripped on the tile paper forms, rustled, and the glow from the television painted everyone in shifting colors. The rain had not let up. It hit the front windows in gusts, sometimes so hard the glass seemed to hum. Every time the automatic doors opened, a draft swept down the main corridor carrying damp air and the faint smell of exhaust. At the charge desk, the triage board was a crowded grid of names and numbers. Red tags outnumbered green. "Busy night," the charge nurse said, tapping a pen against the board. "Accident on the interstate pileup. We are about to get slammed." Dr. Jonah Reed flipped through a stack of charts, jaw tight. "Of course we are short-staffed," he said. "Of course half the city picks the same hour to crash their cars." He handed a chart to Nora without looking at her. "Room 4 needs vitals and a repeat pain score," he said. "And check on our miracle in observation, Jennings." Nora took the folder, nodded, and moved down the hall. As she walked past the front windows, a flicker at the edge of her vision drew her gaze outside. The parking lot beyond the glass was awash of reflections. Ambulance lights flashed red and blue on puddles and bumpers. Between the regular rows of cars in the far corner where the security lights faded, she saw them. Not one vehicle this time, several. Dark shapes sat in a staggered line, too uniform to be random. Their windshields caught the light once, as if someone inside had moved. Then the rain smeared the view again. She watched for a second longer than she had to, then turned away and kept moving. Jennings lay in a curtained observation bay hooked to monitors that now showed a slow but steady rhythm. The gray in his beard looked softer in the dimmer light. Someone had cleaned the foam from his mouth and taped a gauze pad over the place where his head had hit the floor. His eyelids fluttered when Nora checked his blood pressure. He did not fully wake. She adjusted the blanket and made sure the call button rested under his hand, even though he was in no state to press it. As she stepped back into the hallway, the radio at the nurse's station snapped to life with sudden urgency. "Trauma inbound," a paramedic voice said. 48-year-old female restrained driver, high-speed collision. Hypotensive abdominal bruising, possible internal bleed. ETA, 4 minutes. Voices rose, chairs scraped. People moved. The ER shifted into a higher gear. Trauma won the charge. Nurse called. "Let us move. Reed, you are lead?" Nora prepped the room. Nora entered Trauma 1 and began to strip the bed. She pulled fresh sheets, slapped sensor pads onto the mattress, checked suction, checked oxygen, checked the airway tray. Everything in its place, each item where her hand would expect it. The doors burst open, and the gurney rolled in wheels, squealing on the damp tile. The paramedic shouted the summary as they moved in a practiced flow. Name is Ellen Cortez, 48. Belted driver front impact airbag deployed. Hypotensive in the field, pressure dropped again in the rig. Abdomen firm, bruising across lower ribs. 1 liter fluids en route, minimal response. GCS 14 drifting. Ellen's face was gray lips tinged blue. A purple bruise fanned out like a storm across her lower chest. Her breaths were shallow and fast. On my count, Reed said. 1, 2, 3. They slid her onto the ER bed. Hands moved in a blur around her. Scissors bit through her shirt and jacket. Lines were checked, monitors attached. The air filled with data. Heart rate 130, someone said. Pressure 70/40. Get me a gas, Reed replied. Type and cross 4 units. Where is the ultrasound? We need to see what is happening in there. The portable ultrasound whined as it powered up. Gel oozed cold and clear onto Ellen's abdomen. The resident held the probe eyes on the grainy black and white image. I see free fluid, he said. A lot of it. So she is bleeding into the abdomen? Reed snapped. Thank you, we already knew that. I need origin, liver, spleen. What am I taking out if I send her upstairs? He watched the screen, frustrated, while the resident chased the image across Ellen's swollen belly. Hard to tell, the younger physician said. There is so much. Ellen's lips moved. Nora leaned in. Hurts, Ellen whispered. Feels like I am being squeezed. Where, Nora asked. Ellen's fingers twitched weakly toward her middle, just above the navel. A nurse called out another pressure. 60/30. She is circling the drain. She will not make it to CT at this rate, someone muttered. Nora stood near the monitor, watching not just the numbers, but the waveform. The arterial line traced out a pattern that dipped and stuttered in a way she had seen before. In a very different place, under a very different sky. She looked from the screen to Ellen's abdomen. The firmness under the skin was not diffused. It pushed upward in a distinct bulge that did not match the usual pattern of a lacerated organ. Her mind lined up details with something that did not belong to this room. Crush, deceleration, mesenteric attachment. Vessels stretched and torn where they anchored the intestines. Blood trapped under pressure, not yet spilled free. She heard herself speak before she decided to. Dr. Reed, she said. Her pressure drop looks like compression, not just volume loss. He did not look up. We are all aware she's bleeding, Hayes, he said. Thank you. The hematoma might be pinching the mesenteric artery. Nora continued. Her voice stayed calm. If you release the pressure, the flow may return before the rest of the volume resuscitation, at least long enough to get her to the operating room. The resident glanced at her, then at Reed. She might have a point, he said. This looks more like a localized mass than diffuse free fluid. Reed frowned at the screen. Sweat gathered at his temples. This is not some field tent, he said. We do not improvise. We follow protocol. Another pressure reading came. 50/30. Her kidneys are going to be gone if we drag this out, the resident said quietly. The room seemed to tighten. The beep of the heart monitor sped up and blurred into a near, continuous tone. Nora kept her eyes on Ellen's face. The woman's breaths were shallow, each one a small shudder. Reed swore under his breath. Fine, he snapped. Small decompression, now then straight to the surgeons. If this goes badly, it is on record that this was not standard. He nodded to the resident, who adjusted his grip on the probe and pointed out the likely pocket. They prepped the skin in a quick circle, gloved hands careful, despite the rush. A needle slid through skin and fascia into the tense space. Dark blood surged into the attached line, then slowed. On the monitor, the arterial waveform shifted. The peaks stood taller. The numbers crept upward. Pressure is coming up, someone said. 65, 70, 80/40. Ellen's shoulders eased a fraction. Her next breath came a little deeper. Call the surgeons, Reed said. Tell them she is coming right now, and she is alive for the moment. Move! The team flowed into motion again, pivoting from resuscitation to transport. As they rushed Ellen out toward the elevator, the room emptied around Nora. The last to leave was the resident, who glanced back at her with something like a question in his expression. Then he was gone, trailing the gurney. For a few seconds, Nora stood alone in the bright, messy trauma bay. The gel on the sheet glistened. A pair of scissors lay abandoned on the floor. On the far wall, the monitor continued to show the last stable line of Ellen's heart before they had unplugged it. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to find Reed in the doorway, chart in hand. Do not do that again, he said. His eyes were hard, though his face was still a little pale. You do not give diagnostic calls over my head in the middle of a trauma. You got lucky, that is all. Nora held his gaze for a moment. Yes, doctor, she said. He waited as if expecting an argument. When none came, he gave a sharp nod and left. She exhaled slowly, pulled a fresh pair of gloves from the box, and began to clear the room. She dropped bloodied gauze into the bin, stripped the sheet-wiped gel from the mattress. Her hands moved with the same unhurried precision as always. At the nurse's station, the story of trauma, one was already spreading. Hayes called it a tech murmured, before the ultrasound even showed it. She just looked at the numbers and said, "Check the artery." "Could be a guess," the other answered. "We all get one right sometimes." Maybe the first replied. "But did you see her during that hallway code? I do not think she guesses much." In the front lobby, the automatic doors slid open to admit another gust of cold air. Maya, carrying a stack of charts, caught sight of two figures outside the glass. They stood under the overhang just beyond the sliding doors, close enough to be sheltered from the direct rain, but far enough that they did not trigger the motion sensor. Both wore dark suits and long coats. Both had their hands clasped loosely in front of them. Their hair was trimmed short, their posture too straight to be relaxed. One of them looked straight through the glass at the chaos inside. His gaze tracked the movement at the nurse's station, drifted past the clusters of patients and families, and paused when Nora crossed the far end of the hall with a bin of supplies. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A hand rose to his ear and pressed there for a moment, like someone checking an invisible earpiece. The other man followed his line of sight, then nodded once. Maya felt the skin on the back of her neck prickle. She stepped closer to the doors for a clearer look. Before she reached them, Frank Delgado strode in from the side corridor, security badge clipped to his belt. He saw the men through the glass and changed direction without hesitation. He scanned his card, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the damp air. The rain had softened to a fine mist that clung to his jacket. Evening, gentlemen, he said. "This area is for patient drop-off. If you need the ER, you can check in at the desk." The man who had been watching Nora turned his head. Behind his dark lenses, his eyes were hidden, but his mouth formed a courteous shape. "We are not here for treatment," he said. His voice was level, professional. "We are waiting for someone, Sergeant Delgado." Frank stilled. "No one here uses that title for me," he said. "We do," the man replied. "We will remain outside. You do not need to worry about us." Maya could not hear their words through the glass, only saw the exchange. Frank's shoulders lost a fraction of their ease. He said something else, less confident now. The man in the suit shook his head once. After a moment, Frank turned and came back inside. As the door closed behind him, the two men resumed their watchful stillness. Maya stepped away from the entrance just before he spotted her. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Nothing for you to worry about," he said. "Keep moving, Lynn." She did as he said, but when she walked down the main corridor again, she felt it too. A sense of eyes on the glass, tracking more than the simple flow of patients and staff. Nora passed the front of the department with a folder under her arm. For a second, she lifted her head and looked toward the doors. The glare on the glass turned her face into a faint reflection superimposed over the dim shapes outside. She stood there for half a heartbeat, her expression unreadable. Then she turned away and disappeared back into the bright, crowded center of the ER. The first hint that the night is not done with them comes in the form of a different kind of siren. It begins as a distant wail that does not match the usual rhythm of city ambulances. The sound grows as it approaches lower and more urgent, then cuts abruptly as the vehicle backs into the bay. "Another trauma?" someone asks. "Not on the board," the charge nurse says, looking up. Nora is finishing a set of vitals in an exam room when the radio crackles. "St. Jude's, this is inbound unit from county transfer," the paramedic says. "Male, 28, shrapnel, wound left shoulder, stable, vitals conscious from a training exercise north of the city. Requested destination confirmed." The phrase is oddly formal. Requested destination confirmed. There are closer hospitals, Nora thinks. She strips the blood pressure cuff from the patient's arm and steps back into the hall. By the time she reaches the main doors, the gurney is already rolling inside. The man on it wears camouflage pants and a dark green t-shirt cut away at the left shoulder. His skin is the flat tan of someone who has seen more sun than Seattle offers. Dried blood clings to the bandage at his upper arm and to the tattoo on his forearm, a set of coordinates inked in black. Dog tags rest against his chest, clicking softly with each jolt of the wheels. Sergeant Luke Ramirez, the paramedic, calls. Explosive ordnance training got too close. Shrapnel left deltoid region, no obvious neurodeficits. Vitals are solid. He insisted on coming here. Insisted, Reed says, as he walks beside the gurney. People do not pick their emergency rooms like restaurants. The paramedic almost smiles. Some do, he says. This one signed a waiver on the way. They steer the gurney into a treatment room. Nora is already there, snapping on gloves, setting up the instrument tray, checking the light. On my count, Reed says. 1, 2, 3. They transfer Luke onto the bed. He grunts as his shoulder hits the mattress. Sorry, Sergeant, Nora says. We will try to make the rest less miserable. His eyes find her face. They are the color of old amber clear, even through the tension of pain. For a second, he looks past her, scanning the room, assessing exits and positions out of habit. Then he looks back and really sees her. He freezes. Ma'am, he says, is not casual. The word lands with the weight of old training. Nora reaches for the bandage. Let us see what we are working with, she says. Do you have allergies? Any meds? Anything I need to know before we give you more than acetaminophen and attitude? Luke does not answer. His gaze does not leave her. You are kidding me, he whispers. No, this cannot be right. Reed pulls on his own gloves. Sergeant Ramirez, I am Dr. Reed, he says. You picked a busy night for this. Try to answer my nurse so we can patch you up and send you back to whatever you were blowing up. Luke ignores him. Ma'am, he says again, softer now. Do you remember Ramadi Rooftop 3, the alley with the burned-out truck? Nora's hands still. Just for a fraction of a second, just enough that she feels it. The room seems to narrow. The bright light above the bed presses down hot and focused. For an instant, she tastes dust at the back of her throat, feels hot wind instead of air conditioning. A shout in Arabic, the crack of small arms far too close, the metallic tang of blood in a stairwell. She tears the gauze away from his shoulder. The wound is messy, but clean enough to be routine. Metal tore through the skin and muscle at an angle missing anything important. There is bruising, swelling, but no bleeding she cannot control. You were there, Luke says. His voice shakes now, not from the pain. You pulled Corporal Dean off the roof when the wall blew. You put a tourniquet on my leg with your radio strap. You screamed at us for not covering the south corner. I know your face. Sergeant Nora says quietly. You are in Seattle. You are in an emergency room. You are on pain medication and adrenaline, and none of that helps memory. I need you to let us do our jobs. She injects a local anesthetic around the wound, her hands steady. The needle slides into skin, then muscle. Luke winces, but does not move away. You had a different name then, he insists. Different hair, same eyes. Nora adjusts the angle of the lamp, blocking his view of her face for a moment. Pain can play tricks, she says. This will sting. Deep breath for me. Reed watches the exchange with a crease between his brows. You are spinning him up? Hayes, he says. We need him calm, not reliving war stories. Nora does not look up. I'm trying to keep infection out of his shoulder, she says. He is the one telling the stories. She irrigates the wound with saline. Water splashes into the basin with a soft, steady rhythm. Bits of dried blood and metallic dust swirl away. Luke grips the side rail. His knuckles whiten. I asked to come here, he says, through his teeth. They told me St. Jude's was closest to the city. I know you are here. They said there was a nurse who moved like she was still in the field. Sergeant Ramirez, Nora says, and there is a note in her voice that is not in any hospital script. This is not a field post. You will lie still and focus on your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That is an order. The word hangs there, thin but unmistakable. Order. Luke blinks. Old reflexes answer before thought. His chest rises, falls, matching the pattern she set. She threads the needle, begins to close the torn edges of skin with small, neat stitches. Dr. Reed steps back, watching more closely now. The precision of her movements gnaws at him. He remembers her hands on Jennings's chest, the exact depth of each compression. He thinks of the trauma room, of the way she had spoken about the mesenteric artery without hesitation, voice cutting through the noise and his indecision. He had dismissed both as luck. Twice in one night begins to feel like something else. Where were you deployed, Sergeant? He asks, partly to shift the focus, partly to hear the answer. Luke's lips twitch. Here and there, he says. Sometimes where we are, we do not log on a map. Reed snorts. Right, he says. You special forces types love your secrets. Luke looks at Nora again. Some secrets keep you breathing, sir, he says. Nora ties off the last stitch, snips the thread, and covers the wound with a clean dressing. Her fingertips press the tape down firmly, then linger for a second on his skin. You will be sore, she says. Keep it clean. Listen when they tell you not to pick up anything heavier than your pride. That earns a ghost of a smile. Yes, ma'am, he says. The word is automatic. She steps back and snaps off her gloves. They fall into the trash with a dry crackle. We will get you some oral meds and a place to rest for a few hours, Reed says, writing orders. Then you can go back to your base and pretend this never happened. Luke opens his mouth as if to protest, then closes it. His eyes are clear now, less delirious, but the confusion remains. He looks from Reed to Nora and back again. Nora leaves before he can say anything else. She exits the room with her shoulders squared and her gaze fixed straight ahead. In the hall, Maya waits with a chart in her hands. He recognized you, Maya says quietly. Or thought he did. Nora adjusts her mask and pulls it down around her neck, buying herself a second. Soldiers see a lot of faces, she says. Sometimes they blur. Faces, maybe, Maya replies, but he remembered details. A rooftop, a burned truck. Nora lifts the chart from Maya's hands and checks the name. Room 9 is asking for pain meds. She says, can you take this and tell them I will be there after pharmacy approves? Maya hesitates, then nods. She walks away, though her eyes stay on Nora for a few steps too long. The shift grinds on. More patients, more scans, more paperwork. Jennings sleeps. Ellen Cortez goes up to surgery. Luke Ramirez dozes in a corner bay after his second dose of pain medication, his dog tags glinting as they rise and fall against his chest. Around 3 a.m, the department settles into a strange, thin quiet. The televisions murmur. Someone laughs in the lounge. The rain has slowed to a light patter, but the windows are still streaked and gray. Nora finishes her last charts and hangs her stethoscope on its hook. She clocks out at the terminal with a soft beep. No one is at the front desk when she walks past. The 2 men in suits are no longer visible near the doors, though a dark vehicle still sits in the far corner of the lot, lights off. She pulls her hood up, steps into the cool, damp air, and walks toward the staff parking area. Her car is small and forgettable. The engine coughs once before starting. She pulls out without looking back. Inside, in the doctor's dictation room, Jonah Reed sits alone at a computer. His tie is loose. His hair is flattened on one side from where he rubbed it too many times. He clicks through his pending notes, but his thoughts drift. First the hallway code, then the trauma call. Now a soldier requesting this ER, specifically looking at his quiet night nurse as if she were a ghost from a war. He swivels his chair. On the counter behind him sits a ring of keys in a red plastic tray. The label reads Night Supervisor. He looks at the keys, then at the clock on the wall, then at the closed door. He stands. The staff locker room smells of detergent and old coffee. Rows of metal lockers line the walls, each door scuffed and dented in its own pattern. A single fluorescent tube buzzes overhead. He finds Nora's locker near the end of the row. Hayes N printed on a strip of white tape, nothing to distinguish it from the others. The key slides into the lock more easily than he expects. The latch clicks. For a moment he hesitates, hand on the metal door. Then he pulls it open. The inside of the locker is almost bare. One spare set of scrubs, folded with military neatness, a small bottle of unscented lotion, a pair of running shoes, a plain backpack. On the top shelf, pushed toward the back, something gray catches his eye. He reaches up and takes it down. It is a cloth pouch, about the size of his palm, made from fabric, worn to a dull, silvery color. The edges are frayed from years of handling. There is no logo on the outside. His throat feels dry. He unties the simple knot and unfolds the cloth. Inside lies a single patch of heavy fabric, maybe 3 inches across. The background is a muted black. In the center, a faded symbol curves half-circle in line like an eclipse, partly covered by shadow. Around it, block letters barely show through the wear. Eclipse Ghost Medic, LVL Omega. The words make his stomach dip. He does not know exactly what they mean, but every part of him tells him they are not part of the standard nursing curriculum. He pulls out his phone and snaps a picture, his hands careful not to blur the image. Then he returns the patch to its pouch, folds the cloth, and puts it back exactly where he found it. He closes the locker door and relocks it, listening for the small click. For a moment he stands there, phone in his hand, pulse throbbing in his ears. In the on-call room, the computer on the desk hums softly. He opens a browser and drags the photo into a reverse image search. The progress circle spins. The screen flashes through results and then returns only a few hits. Some are dead links. Some are press releases with entire paragraphs blacked out. One page opens. The headline at the top is short and stark. Disavowed the ghost. Medics of the Eclipse program. Below it, a grainy black and white photograph shows a row of soldiers in desert gear standing beside a helicopter. One of them is shorter than the rest, the features blurred, but the posture familiar. Shoulders back, weight balanced, hands still. He zooms in until the pixels break apart. He cannot swear it is Nora. He does not have to. His heart beats faster. This is not a nursing blog or a conspiracy forum. The site address is an archive of an old defense journal. His thumb hovers over the image on his phone. He selects it and taps to delete, suddenly aware of how reckless it is to have the patch on his personal device. A small pop-up appears on the screen. File locked, external review in progress. The message stays for a full second longer than any phone notification should. The screen flickers, then returns to the photo without deleting it. Come on, he murmurs, what the hell is that? He tries again. Same message, same delay. This time the signal icon at the top of the screen drops to nothing and then crawls back to 1 bar. Every instinct honed by a decade of working around sensitive information and hospital privacy laws screams at him that he has just crossed a line he cannot uncross. He stuffs the phone into the desk drawer and closes it, as if that would hide him from whatever looked back through the glass of his screen. In the quiet that follows, he hears the hum of the vending machine, the distant ring of a nurse's laughter, and under it all, the soft, relentless tap of rain on the high windows of the hospital. In the windowless security office, the rain was just a sound in the walls. Frank Delgado sat in front of the monitor wall, one big hand wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, that had gone cold an hour before. Screens showed slices of the hospital from a dozen angles: hallways, elevators, the front entrance with its sliding glass doors. "Back it up 10 hours, he said. The younger guard at the keyboard tapped a few keys. The image of the main parking lot jumped backward in time. Morning light replaced the night glare. Cars appeared and vanished as the feed skipped. "Stop there," Delgado said. On the screen at the far edge of the lot where the light poles faded, a dark vehicle slid into frame. Then another, then another. "Count them," Delgado said. 8, the guard answered after a moment, all the same make. They watched as each SUV nosed into a slot, not scattered, but aligned along the back fence in a clean, even line. "Nobody gets out," the guard said. "Fast forward," Delgado told him. Hours compressed into seconds. People came and went. Ambulances arrived and left. The 8 vehicles stayed. Occasionally a door opened, a shadow crossed from one to the other, then slipped back inside. One SUV near the center raised a short, narrow structure on its roof. The shape unfolded like a metal flower, then locked in place. "Pause," Delgado said. The guard froze the image. It was not a standard antenna. This one had panels angles a compact dish. Delgado had seen similar hardware on mobile command vans years ago for units with budgets big enough to talk to the sky. "Zoom on that one," he said, tapping a knuckle against the screen. The picture grew grainy as the camera magnified the section. The antenna stayed blurred, but recognizable. A rectangle of mud smeared across the license plate. Enough grime to obscure, but not so much that it looked accidental. The last 2 characters were visible, stamped into metal, just above the bumper. "Those are government series," Delgado said under his breath. The guard swiveled toward him. "You think these are feds?" he asked. "Like I do not know marshals or something?" Delgado shook his head slowly. "Marshals do not sit on a lot for 10 hours without checking in," he said. "And they do not bring satellite rigs for a warrant pickup." He leaned back in his chair, the plastic creaking under his weight, and looked at the frozen line of vehicles. Their windows gave nothing back, just black. "Run the live feed," he said. The guard brought the video to real time. Outside, the sky was a washed-out gray. The 8 SUVs still sat where they had parked, like they had grown roots during the night. "They have not moved once," the guard said. "Not once," Delgado repeated. He checked the time. Late afternoon. Nora's shift would start soon. He remembered the way the men in suits at the front entrance had said his old rank without hesitation. "Not Mr. Not Sir. Sergeant." The paper cup in his hand had cooled so much, it might as well have been water. He set it aside. "Save this segment," he said. "Label it external vehicles. Do not overwrite." The guard nodded, fingers already on the keys. Delgado stood his knees popping softly and left the room without another word. Out in the emergency department, the hum of the day shift was shifting toward the sharper edge of evening. The fluorescent lights seemed a little brighter as the gray outside deepened. At the nurses' station, the day crew was finishing reports. The night crew gathered in small groups, scanning assignments on the whiteboard. Maya stood in front of the board reading the list. Her name was penciled in next to 3 rooms and 1 hallway section. Under that, written in neat block letters, was another name. Hayes, Nora, hallway care. Of course. She asked for hallway again, the charge nurse said, catching Maya's look. Said she does not mind the overflow. She never minds anything, another nurse replied. You could give her a broom and tell her to clean the parking lot. She would say sure. They laughed, but it was softer than usual. The memory of the soldier calling Nora ma'am still hung in the air, a story already retold in different corners of the department. The staff entrance opened with a beep of the badge reader. Nora stepped through, hair pulled back. Scrub top slightly damp at the shoulders from the rain. She signed her name on the clipboard, clipped her ID to her pocket, and took in the room with one quick sweep of her eyes. Maya watched her notice the board, the patients, the monitors, the front windows, all in a few seconds. It was like watching someone trace a route on a map they already knew well. Evening, Nora, the charge nurse said. Hallway and rooms 5 and 6 are yours. Got it, Nora said. She took her assignment sheet and moved immediately toward the supply room, the small laminated page already organized in her head. Maya fell into step beside her. Sergeant Ramirez was asking for you earlier, Maya said. Before they discharged him. How is his shoulder? Nora asked. Sore, proud, Maya said. He told anyone who would listen about a medic who saved him on a rooftop once. Sounded like a movie. Nora's hand paused on the handle of the supply cabinet. War stories grow each time they are told, she said. Helps them make sense. She opened the cabinet, reached for a stack of IV kits, and loaded them into a blue plastic bin. Her movements were efficient, but there was a tightness at her jaw that had not been there the night before. Maya reached for a box on the higher shelf. Her elbow clipped the edge of the bin. It wobbled, tilted toward the floor. Before she could grab it, Nora stepped sideways and caught the bin with one hand. Her other foot slid back, her center of gravity dropping. The movement was smooth, trained, almost fluid. The box settled back on the shelf as if it had never moved. Sorry, Maya said, clumsy. No harm done, Nora said. She adjusted the bin, then stepped out of the narrow storage room. Her shoulders stayed angled, not fully exposing her back to the hallway. When a volunteer pushing a wheelchair appeared suddenly at her left, she pivoted just enough to avoid the collision, turning her body so the chair rolled past with inches to spare. Nice footwork, the volunteer said, half amused. Habit, Nora replied. At the far end of the corridor, Delgado came into view. He walked slower than usual, eyes moving from window to window. Nora, he called. She stopped, giving him the small nod she reserved for the security staff, respectful, but not intimate. Everything all right, Frank? She asked. You tell me, he said. His gaze flicked toward the front of the hospital where the glass doors reflected the lights inside. You seen anything strange in the lot the past day or so? Besides the usual parade, she said. No. He hesitated. You ever work with federal teams? He asked lightly. Joint drills, maybe? Her expression did not change. Why, she asked. Because there are 8 black SUVs sitting in my parking lot that have not budged in 10 hours, he said, and they brought their own satellite uplink. Maya, lingering by the station, pretended to study a chart, ears tilted their way. Nora glanced toward the entrance. From this angle, she could not see beyond the glare on the glass, only the smear of rain and the reflection of the waiting room chairs. Maybe they are here for someone important upstairs, she said. Maybe, Delgado said. Funny thing, though, they knew my rank from 20 years ago. He watched her face. Her eyes stayed steady, but her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the supply bin. You should tell administration, she said. I did, he answered. They told me to keep an eye out and not make a fuss. He gave a short, humorless chuckle. Just thought I would ask if you ever heard of eclipse, he added. The words slid into the air between them like a stone dropped into deep water. Nora's grip on the bin went very still. For a heartbeat, her pupils narrowed. Then she blinked a single slow movement, and the surface smoothed. Sounds like a movie, she said. Sure, Delgado replied. Probably is. He let it go. For now. He walked on, leaving her standing in the middle of the corridor. Maya watched Nora turn away with measured calm and head toward the nurse's station. There was something new in the way she carried herself now, a coiled readiness, as if the familiar walls might shift at any second. It was almost a relief when the glass doors at the front hissed open with their soft mechanical sigh. A man in a black suit walked in alone. He was not one of the 2 from the night before. This one was taller, with close-cropped blonde hair and a face that might have been handsome if it were not so controlled. No tie. The top button of his shirt was open, but his posture remained textbook straight. He did not go to the reception desk right away. His gaze swept the room in a single arc. Families hunched in chairs, a child crying softly, an elderly man dozing with his mouth open. Then his eyes landed on the nurse station. Nora stood there with her back half-turned, checking a medication against a chart. The fluorescent light fell on her hair on the line of her neck on the set of her shoulders. The man stopped walking. Something shifted behind his expression. The muscles of his jaw locked. His arms went straight at his sides, fingers pressed gently against the seams of his trousers. His heels lined up together. He stood as if a voice had barked a command only he could hear. From her place at the edge of the station, Maya saw the change. One second he was just another suit. The next he looked like a soldier on a parade ground. Sir, the receptionist said, "Can I help you?" The man's gaze stayed on Nora a moment longer. She sensed it. Her spine straightened even more, and for an instant her hand froze on the pen she held. Then she turned to the side to reach for a vial, and the edge of the computer monitor blocked his view of her face. The spell broke. He blinked. His shoulders dropped a fraction. He cleared his throat and looked at the receptionist as if remembering himself. I am in the wrong place, he said quickly. I was told to check in with administration, not the emergency department. My mistake. You want the main lobby, she said. Back that way, second elevator bank, 3rd floor. He nodded. Thank you. He pivoted fast, the movement a little too sharp, and started toward the hallway that led away from the ER. As he turned, a slim folder slid from under his arm, fell and skidded across the floor until it bumped against a trash can. He did not notice. His stride did not falter. A janitor pushing a mop bucket along the corridor saw the folder, set the brake on the bucket, and bent to pick it up. Sir, he called. You dropped this. The man in the suit did not pause. Either he did not hear or he chose not to. Guess he is in a hurry, the janitor said to himself. He turned back toward the nurse's station, the folder in his hand. Someone left this, he said. Looks important. Has that government manila look? He set it on the counter and went back to his bucket. The folder was a heavy, yellow stock, edges slightly worn. A single red stripe ran across the top. Stamped in bold black letters above the stripe was the word, confidential. Maya's pulse gave an odd little jump. She looked at the doorway where the man had disappeared, then at the folder. Nobody touched that one, nurse said under her breath. I do not want to end up on a list. Nora was across the station now, head bent over a medication log. She either did not see the folder or chose not to. Dr. Jonah Reed walked up at that moment, chart under his arm eyes on the order screen. "What is this?" he asked, more to the air than to anyone in particular. "Suit guy dropped it," the janitor said over his shoulder. "Tried to give it back." He walked off. Reed glanced at the red stripe, at the word confidential, at the lack of any hospital logo. His first instinct was to leave it alone. The memory of the message on his phone file, locked, still sat under his skin like a splinter. Maya stepped closer. "Maybe we should give it to security," she said. "Maybe we should see if it is actually for us first," Reed replied before he could stop himself. He slid a finger under the flap and opened the folder just wide enough to see the first page. At the top, in clean-centered type, was a header. Department of Defense, Medical Operations Division. Below that, in a smaller box, a label. Subject Hayes, Nora E. Status Classified, former call sign, Seraph Unit Eclipse, Ghost Medic. His mouth went dry. Maya leaned in beside him. Her eyes traced the same lines. She whispered the words, as if saying them aloud might make them less real. "Ghost Medic," she said. "Eclipse." Reed closed the folder with the soft snap fingers pressing the cardboard flat. Around them, the ER continued its usual noise. Somewhere a monitor beeped. A baby cried. A door clicked shut. Near the front, rain streaked the glass in long, steady lines. Outside, the dark shapes of the waiting SUVs barely showed at the edge of the lot like shadows that refused to move. For a moment, no one at the station spoke. Reed kept his hand flat on the folder, as if it might slide away on its own. Maya watched his knuckles whiten against the cardboard. Her eyes flicked once to Nora, who was still at the far end of the counter, checking a medication label. "Dr. Maya said quietly, that cannot be real." Reed swallowed. "I do not know what it is," he answered. "But this stays here. No photos, no gossip. Understood?" She nodded. Her gaze stayed on the line that read, Subject, Hayes, Nora, E. Before either of them could say more, a sound rose beneath the normal hospital noise. It was low at first, like distant thunder that did not match the fall of rain. Then it grew a long, rising tone that cut through the building. The usual ambulance sirens were high and frantic. This one was deeper, slower, with a kind of command built into it. Conversations in the waiting room faltered. People lifted their heads. "What is that?" a visitor asked, looking around. The charge nurse turned toward the entrance. "That is not ours," she said. In the security office, Delgado was halfway through a report when the sound rattled the vents. He looked up at the monitors and saw the line of black SUVs come alive. Headlights flared bright white pools on wet asphalt. Engines roared to life in quick succession. The lead vehicle pulled out of its space and swung around. The rest followed, sliding into formation with eerie, practiced ease. "Holy hell," the younger guard whispered. The 8 vehicles moved together, 2 to the ambulance bay, the rest to the main loop in front of the emergency entrance. They did not hurry. They did not need to. The low siren came from one of them, a bar of light on its grill, pulsing in time with the sound. "Call admin," Delgado said. "Now. Tell them we have guests." He snatched up his own radio. "This is security," he said. "All units to the emergency entrance. We have multiple government vehicles inbound. No one blocks them, but no one gets stupid either." Out front, the loop filled with dark metal and light. The SUVs angled themselves across the driveway, effectively blocking any other car from pulling up to the doors. Tires hissed on wet pavement as they came to a stop. The low siren cut off. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain. Then doors opened, all at once. Men and women climbed out of the vehicles. Some wore dark suits, others wore muted tactical gear over plain clothes. All of them moved with the same coordinated purpose. They did not shout. They did not run. They simply came forward at a fast walk lines, forming almost instinctively. Maya stood by the nurse's station charts in hand as the automatic doors slid open. Cold air spilled into the lobby, carrying the smell of wet concrete and diesel. The first person through the doors held up a badge wallet. The gold flashed against the fluorescent light. "Federal personnel," he said in a voice that carried without needing to be loud. "We need clear access to your emergency department, now." The receptionist stammered. "Sirs, you cannot just walk back. You have to sign in. If you have a warrant, you need to show—" He did not raise his voice. "Did not have to. You can call your administrator," he said. "They have been notified. We are not here to interfere with patient care. We are here for a member of your staff." Delgado arrived at a jog, one hand on his belt. "You want to slow down and give us some names," he said. Planting himself between the group and the main corridor, the man at the front shifted his badge so Delgado could see it better. The shield was not one he recognized from the usual agencies. Beside the medal was a laminated card with more text than picture. "Commander Ryan Keene," he said. "Joint Operations Command Medical Division. We are here under directive from the Department of Defense. We need Nurse Nora Hayes. She is to accompany us immediately." A circle seemed to open around those words. Conversation all over the department dimmed. Heads turned. Maya's fingers tightened on the chart she held. Reed felt his heartbeat climb into his throat. "You cannot just take my nurse the charge," nurse said from behind the desk. "She is on duty. You need a warrant or a court order or something." "This is not a criminal matter," Keene replied. "This is a matter of national security. I have orders signed and logged." He tapped the inside of the badge wallet. "You can verify them later." Reed stepped forward before he could stop himself. "She is a civilian medical provider," he said. "You do not have authority to direct her here, not without her consent. You can ask, but you do not get to drag her out of this department on some vague emergency." Keene turned his head and really looked at Reed for the first time. His eyes were a washed blue, not unkind, but very tired. There were lines at the corners that came from more than smiling. "You must be one of her attendings," he said. "I am Dr. Reed," Jonah answered. "One of the physicians who actually has to run this place when people in suits decide to make a scene." A few staff members shifted uneasily, but Keene only nodded once. "Dr. Reed," he said, "if this were a request, I would have come alone. It is not. We have a critical situation unfolding at this moment. We have wounded personnel in a location where we cannot place conventional surgical support. Their lives depend on one thing." He paused. His gaze swept the room, then came back to Reed. "They depend on Ghost Medic," he said. "On Seraph. On the only field surgeon we ever trained who could improvise a vascular repair with a pocket knife and a ruined backpack in a sandstorm. She is not just your nurse. She is the last operational asset from the Eclipse program. She is priority one." The phrase seemed to knock the air out of the room. Maya felt the hairs on her arms lift. Delgado pressed his lips together, eyes narrowing. The receptionist stood frozen hands hovering over her keyboard. Someone near the back whispered "Ghost Medic" as if trying out the words. Nora was midway down the corridor, a medication tray in her hands, when she heard Commander Keene speak her call sign. "Seraph." The sound of it reached her through the tangle of voices and monitor beeps and the quiet hiss of the oxygen tanks. For a heartbeat, she thought she had imagined it, that her brain had pulled an old name out of storage. Then she saw the formation of suits and gear at the entrance and Keene at the front, and the way every pair of eyes at the nurse's station had swung toward her. The tray felt suddenly heavier. She placed it carefully on the counter beside her, aligning it with the edge, as if that small act could keep the world from tilting. Keene saw her then. Whatever discipline held him in check slipped for an instant. His posture snapped even straighter, his arms fell to his sides, his chin dipped by a degree. Anyone else might have called it a simple stiffening. To someone who had grown up inside that posture, it was more. It was a salute he could not quite give in public. "Nora Hayes," he called. His voice did not rise in volume, but it carried like the siren had finding its own way through the noise. "Seraph." The last word was softer, meant more for her than for anyone else. The hallway seemed to lengthen between them. The tile under her shoes felt very solid. The air tasted faintly of disinfectant and rain. She walked forward because there was no other way to go. Every step brought her under more eyes. Nurses who had worked beside her for months. Doctors who had barely noticed her texts, who knew her handwriting, but not her story, all watched now as if seeing a stranger walk in her clothes. She stopped at a comfortable distance from Keene, far enough that she had to raise her voice a little close enough that she could see the fine stubble on his jaw and the thin white scar at his temple. "Commander," she said, "this is a hospital." "I am aware," he said. There was something like regret in his tone. "We tried to keep it clean. We ran it through channels. They told us to use the assets we still had." "I am not your asset," she replied. He accepted the correction with a small incline of his head. "Then I will say it this way," he said. "We have 6 people in a collapsing structure 3,000 miles from here. They are bleeding into concrete and dirt with no surgeon and no way down to reach one in time. What they do have is a communications rig that can feed you real-time video and vitals. They have hands and knives and minimal supplies. They need someone who has seen worse and walked them through it. That someone is you." The staff listened, caught between fear and disbelief. "Call 911, a visitor muttered to his wife as if there were anyone else to call. Reed could not stand it. "You are telling me you parked an army in front of my ER because you need a phone consultation," he demanded. Keene's gaze flicked to him. "No," he said quietly. "We parked outside your ER because Command knows what happens to people who get too close to Eclipse. Because you are not the only ones being monitored tonight. Because they wanted every variable controlled when I asked Seraph a question." He turned back to Nora. "Will you come with us?" he asked. "And do what you were born to do one more time?" It was not an order, not yet. Nora was very aware of every breath in the room. The slow wheeze of an older man on oxygen behind her. The quick, shallow pant of a nervous teenager holding a towel to his forehead. The whisper of cloth as a nurse shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Rain streaked the windows in long, thin rivulets. The reflection of the emergency bay lights shimmered over the wet glass like distant flares. She looked at Keen, then at the faces behind him. Some were unfamiliar, a few she recognized from grainy after-action briefings and field reports. Men and women who had walked away from places no one else would publicly admit existed. Behind her, Maya whispered her name. Nora. It was not a warning. It was not encouragement, just a name and a voice that shook. Nora closed her eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw a concrete staircase slick with blood, a pair of hands losing their grip, a helicopter lifting into a brown sky while she watched from the ground. She opened her eyes again to the harsh white light of St. Jude's emergency department and the sound of rain on glass. She opened her eyes again to the harsh white light of St. Jude's emergency department and the sound of rain on glass. I'm not coming back, Nora said. Her voice was low, but the quiet around her made every word carry. Whatever program you think still exists, it does not include me. Keen studied her face. He looked older up close than he had from the doorway. There was gray at his temples that had not been there in the last briefing she remembered. His eyes were still the same, though. Steady, tired. The program exists on paper, he said. In reality, it is a handful of voices on encrypted channels and too many names on walls. I know what you walked away from. You do not, she said. Something moved on the edge of her vision. Maya stood near the station, frozen with the chart in her hands. Behind her, Reed had one palm flat on the counter as if steadying himself. Nora kept her gaze on Keen. I watched a building drop on my team, she said. I watched them dig through concrete with their bare hands while I told them which body to reach first. I signed the reports afterward. I watched their names get reduced to numbers in a file. I am not going to sit behind another screen while people bleed out 3,000 miles away. Keen listened without interrupting. Around them, the government personnel held their positions, a loose ring of dark clothing and concealed holsters. No one in the circle shifted. It felt less like an invasion and more like a perimeter. We are not asking you to watch them die, he said. We are asking you to keep them from it. That is what you said last time, she answered. A beat of silence. Somewhere near the waiting room, a child began to cry soft and high. A nurse murmured to comfort him. Keen reached into his coat and pulled out a flat, rugged tablet encased in black rubber. It was scratched along the edges. A pattern of small white marks lined one corner where it had hit something hard. He held it where she could see. They repurposed one of the Eclipse rigs, he said. They have live feeds from helmet cams, remote vitals, the works. It is not clean. It is not what you would want in a theater with full support. It is what we have. The screen was dark. She could see her own reflection faintly in it, layered over the blurred outlines of agents and staff. Where are they? She asked. In a failed structure outside a city we are not discussing here, he said. You can read the coordinates on the way if you decide to come. The building partially collapsed. What is left is unstable. They cannot bring more weight in without risking the rest coming down. They have 6 wounded inside 3 walking wounded outside, trying to hold pressure where they can. They have maybe an hour of workable window before gravity finishes the job for them. And Command's answer to that, Nora said, is to pull a nurse out of a hospital on the other side of the world, to shout at them through a camera. Command's answer, Keen said, is to use the only person they have seen manage a multiple casualty event in a structure just like that, and walk away with everyone who was still breathing at the start. It is not about shouting. It is about knowing what to cut and what to leave. It is about seeing the anatomy in your head when the image is nothing but dust and a flashlight. Her hands were bare. She looked down at them for a second. The skin across her knuckles was unremarkable to anyone else. To her, every faint line had a story. These hands work here, she said. I can see my patients. I can reach them. I do not have to hear someone choke through static and guess if the air is getting to their lungs. Reed stepped closer. She is right, he said to Keen. You are asking for remote surgery from an ER nurse who has already put in a full shift. You have other doctors, trauma surgeons. Use them. Keen did not take his eyes off Nora. We tried, he said. We put 3 of your best trauma surgeons in front of Eclipse feeds last year. They froze at the first unplanned collapse. They could not think beyond protocols. They asked for instruments that did not exist. They kept shouting for a CT, for labs, for an OR. It is not their fault. It is how they were trained. He nodded once toward Nora. She learned somewhere else, he added. Maya found her voice. How many times have you done this? She asked. Nora did not answer. Keen did. Enough to know that if she says no now, he said, I will have to call 6 families in a week and tell them we did not try everything. Nora felt the air shift in the room the way it did before a storm. It was not about the numbers. It was about the weight of choosing. I have patients here, she said. People in the hallway with no beds. A homeless man who only survived because we got his heart back before you rolled up with your convoy. You want me to walk away from them because someone in a bunker drew a line on a map. Those patients have an entire hospital around them, Keene replied. Those 6 have a handful of exhausted operators, a static-filled connection, and a rig that might lose signal if a cloud moves the wrong way. I am not telling you they matter more. I am telling you they have no one else. He took a step closer, lowering his voice, just enough that it was nearly private, though half the floor leaned in unconsciously. When Eclipse was buried, he said, "You were the one name I argued to keep on file, not because I wanted to drag you back, because I knew there would come a night when someone would be trapped in a hole we could not reach, and we would sit in a room and ask each other if we had missed anything. I did not ever want to have to say, we had Seraph once, we let her go and never called." His eyes held hers. "I am calling," he said. She remembered that last debrief room, air so cold it made her nails ache. A circle of faces that moved between admiration and fear when they looked at her. The way the word disavowed had sounded when the colonel said it like something being erased, but not gone. "I am not your legend," she said. "I am a night nurse who cleans up after other people's heroics." Luke Ramirez's voice came from behind the group. "With respect, ma'am," he said, "you are more than that." He stood near the doorway of one of the bays, left arm in a sling, hospital bracelet, still on his wrist. Someone had tried to tell him to stay put. He had ignored them. He walked forward slowly, each step careful but determined. The agents shifted to block him until one saw the tags at his neck and the way he carried himself, then waved him through. He stopped a few feet from Nora and Keene. His face was still too pale, but his eyes were steady. Sergeant Keene said, "You should be lying down." "Yes, sir," Luke answered. "I will regret getting up in about 10 seconds. Worth it." He looked at Nora. "Ma'am," he said, "if this is the same kind of thing as Ramadi, they are not going to make it without you. My squad would not have. You did things with a torn aid bag and a flashlight that I still cannot explain to the guys at the VA. You told us where to put our hands, when to let go, who to carry first. We walked out because you were in our ears." Nora set her jaw. "You walked out because you did what you had to," she said. "You covered sectors and kept your heads down." "We walked out," Luke said, "because when everything fell apart, you did not." The ER had gone so quiet that the hiss of the automatic door opening briefly at the back sounded loud. Someone coming in for a sprained ankle saw the ring of dark clothing and stopped, sensing the tension without understanding it. "Ma'am," Luke said softer now. "Those 6 out there, wherever they are, they probably have someone like me on the line. Some idiot who thinks he can hold pressure forever if he just squeezes hard enough. He needs a voice to tell him when to move his hand and where to put it next. I know what that voice sounds like." He did not look away from her. "Please," he said. The word hung in the air. Nora felt something in her chest, old and heavy, shift. Not a snap. More like a slow, reluctant turn. In the corner of her vision, she saw Jennings on his monitor, his heart tracing a sleepy, regular rhythm. She saw the woman in the stained hoodie now dozing under a warm blanket. She saw the kid with the splinted wrist watching with wide eyes, absorbing the scene as if it were something on television. She also saw a stairwell half-collapsed, a man pinned under a beam, his lips blue, while someone tried to thread a tube into his throat with half the wall leaning over them. She saw her own hands in front of her moving through blood and dust, without shaking because there was no one else to do it. She drew a slow breath. "You pull me out of here," she said finally, "and I am not a tech. You can plug into your system and turn off when you are done. I am not an officer. You can order into a room and out of it again. There are terms." Keene did not smile, but something eased at the edges of his mouth. "Name them," he said. "Name them," he said. Nora lifted her chin a fraction. If she felt the eyes on her, she did not show it. "First," she said, "every medical decision runs through me. I am the final authority on treatment. Not you, not whoever is on the other end of the radio. No one overrides my calls once we are on the line." Keene nodded without hesitation. "Done," he said. Second, she continued, "I set the protocol. Eclipse field triage, the version we used before someone tried to tidy it up for a training manual. I decide who they touch and when. You do not second-guess that because it looks ugly on a report." "Accepted," he said. "Eclipse protocol, your version." Third, she said, "I get full access to whatever you have on that site. Lay out threats, structural reports, even if they are classified above whatever level you think I have. If I have to tell someone to cut into a person in the dark, I am not doing it blind." Keene took that one in, then inclined his head. "I can clear that," he said. "You will have what the forward team has. No filters." Fourth, Nora said, "This is not a reactivation. When it is done, I go back to my shift. I clock in, I clock out. You do not put my name on a list and decide I am back in rotation. I am not back in your chain of command." He met her eyes. "Seraph," he said quietly, "you were never in my chain of command. You were always just beyond it." "That is not an answer," she said. He straightened. "When the operation is over," he said clearly enough for everyone to hear, "we release you. No recall orders. No standing tasking. If command tries to write something different, I will put my name on the objection. You cannot guarantee that, Reed said sharply. Keene glanced at him. No, he said. I cannot guarantee paper. I can guarantee what I do with it. Nora watched his face for a long second as if weighing old memories against present words. Last thing she said. If I say you pull them out, you pull them. No one leaves a hand on a bleeding artery because someone wants another piece of intel. Something dark flickered in Keene's eyes. He understood exactly what she was referring to. That is non-negotiable, she added. Then it is agreed, he said. If you call abort, they come home, or what is left of them does. Silence spread out from where they stood. The agents and operators in black clothing had gone very still. They were not part of the bargaining, but every one of them was listening. Nora nodded once. Then I will go, she said. The words were not loud, but they dropped through the room like a weight. Maya let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Delgado's shoulders sagged a little, as if backing away from a cliff he had been inching toward. Keene drew himself up fully. Ma'am, he said. There was something like relief in the single syllable. He turned slightly and raised his voice. You heard her. Eclipse protocol. Medical authority is Seraph. No overrides. Every agent and operator in the formation snapped to attention. Boots clicked. Spines straightened. In one motion, controlled and smooth, 24 hands rose in salute, palms, sharp eyes, fixed on Nora. The ER had never seen anything like it. Nurses who had worked a dozen mass casualties doctors, who had watched entire codes crash and restart, now stood in a fluorescent-lit department while a military unit saluted a woman they had been sending to mop blood and restock syringes. Dr. Reed felt something twist in his chest. He had misjudged her so completely, it almost made him dizzy. Nora did not return the salute. She had never needed to. She simply stood, eyes level, and let it pass through her. Keene dropped his hand. Gear, he said, turning to one of the operators. A man with a close-shaved head stepped forward and set a heavy black bag on the floor by Nora's feet. It was about the size of a carry-on marked with a faded medical cross. Its zippers were taped in places where they had snagged on something in the past. Jump bag from the forward team, the man said. Stocked to your specs, as close as we could get. Another operator brought the tablet to her. The screen was still dark. Scratches cut across its surface like old scars. Nora looked down at the bag. For a moment, her hand went to her scrub pocket. Her fingers closed around the shape inside the rough edge of the eclipse patch, pressing into her palm. She closed her eyes briefly, just long enough to pull one steady breath in and out. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The lines of her face had not changed, but the way she held herself had. The slight hunch she used at the nurse's station, the way she made herself smaller, was gone. She slung the bag over her shoulder like she had done it yesterday instead of years ago. The strap settled across her chest. It belonged there in a way no stethoscope ever had. Her voice when she spoke cut through the room cleanly. Reed, she said. He stepped closer without thinking. Yes, he said. She nodded toward the hallway. The people in our hallway do not have anyone parked outside for them, she said. The woman in the hoodie, the kid with the wrist, Jennings, they are yours while I am gone. Do not let anyone slip through, because the circus landed in your waiting room. He swallowed. I will not, he said. I promise. Do not promise, she said. Just do it. He almost smiled despite the knot in his stomach. Yes, ma'am, he said, and only realized after that the word had slipped out. Maya stepped forward. Nora, she said softly. Nora turned to her. You keep an eye on them too, she said. And on him. She tipped her head slightly toward Luke, who stood a little behind Keene, now shoulder still in its sling. Yes, Maya said. Her throat felt tight. You come back all right? Nora held her gaze. I will try, she said. There was no bravado in it, just a simple acknowledgement of risk. She shifted the bag, tested its weight, then looked at Luke. Sergeant Ramirez, she said. He snapped to attention as straight as his injured shoulder allowed. Ma'am, he said. You are off the line, she said. You will go back to your bed. Let someone ice that shoulder, and you will not follow anyone out of this building. Understood? Understood, he said. Respectfully, I would go if you asked. I am not asking, she said. That is an order. His lips twitched. Yes, ma'am, he said again, this time with a hint of reluctant humor. Keene gestured toward the doors. Vehicle is ready, he said. The agents shifted, forming around Nora, in a loose box, leaving her clear space in the middle. It was protective, but not suffocating, a practiced pattern meant to move a very important person through uncertain space. As they started forward, staff moved out of the way. Some stepped back without realizing it. Others pressed themselves against the walls, eyes locked on Nora. Jennings's monitor beeped gently as they passed his bay. The woman in the hoodie blinked awake and watched the procession with dull surprise. The teenage boy with the wrist brace leaned over the edge of his bed to see better, his mouth slightly open. At the end of the corridor, the automatic doors parted. Rain cooled the air, bringing with it the faint smell of wet asphalt and engine heat. Outside, the line of black SUVs waited with engines idling, headlights casting bright cones across the glistening pavement. Nora paused on the threshold. For a heartbeat, she stood between two worlds, behind her antiseptic and white light and the endless cycle of minor and major disasters. In front of her, dark metal, unfamiliar plates and problems that had never seen a chart. She stepped out into the rain. Drops spattered her scrub top, darkening the blue. Her hair, already damp from the earlier walk-in, caught a few stray beads. The operators around her did not flinch at the wet. They had stood in worse many times. The nearest SUV's rear door swung open from inside. Keene climbed in first, tablet in hand. Nora followed, ducking her head. The jump bag thumped softly against the seat as she settled. Two agents took the remaining places. The door shut with a solid final sound. Through the tinted window, the staff in the ER lobby became faint shadows. Maya's face was one pale blur among them. Reed's white coat showed as a brighter smudge. The engines of the convoy rose together. Delgado stood just inside the doors, arms folded, watching. The low growl of the engines vibrated through the floor. The lead SUV rolled forward, the others following in tight sequence, pulling away from the entrance and curving out onto the access road. The red and white lights washed across the wet glass reflections, sliding over the faces inside. Then the vehicles turned toward the street. Their lights became smaller, then disappeared entirely into the rain, dark. As the sound of the engines faded, the ER seemed to inhale. The automatic doors closed with a quiet sigh. The temperature inside felt abruptly warmer. The overhead lights hummed. Somewhere delayed by the interruption, a call light finally chimed from a back room, polite and insistent. For a few seconds after the last engine faded, no one moved. The sound that finally broke the stillness was small. A call light chimed from a back room, a thin electronic ping that seemed almost embarrassed to intrude. A monitor in the corner gave a soft alarm. Somewhere down the hall, a patient coughed. Life in the ER came back in pieces. The receptionist picked up the phone because it would not stop ringing. Lines that had gone unanswered during the arrival of the convoy now stacked up on the screen. She pressed a button. "St. Jude's emergency," she said. "Please hold." Another line lit, then another. "St. Jude's emergency," she repeated. "Please hold." Within a minute, all 5 lines glowed red. "What is it?" the charge nurse asked. "Media," I think the receptionist said. "And some of them say they are from federal offices. They all want to know about the vehicles." "Do not say a word," the charge nurse replied. "Tell them to call administration." The overhead speakers crackled. "Dr. Marshall, to the emergency department," a voice announced. "Dr. Marshall, to the emergency department." That was not a usual page. Dr. Richard Marshall was the hospital's chief medical officer. He did not often come to the ER in person. Maya stood at the nurse's station with a chart held loosely in her hands. Ink from her pen had soaked into the paper where it rested. She had not written anything in several minutes. "Lynn," the charge nurse said, snapping her out of it. "You still with us?" "Yes," she said quickly. "Sorry, room 9 still needs his meds. I will take care of it." She forced her feet to move. As she passed the front windows, she glanced out, half expecting the SUVs to still be there. The loop in front of the entrance was empty. Rain glossed the pavement where they had been. By the time she returned to the station, Dr. Marshall was there. He was in his 50s, hair-thinning tie knotted too tight for this late in the day. A laminated ID badge hung from his jacket pocket. Beside him stood a woman from administration that most of the staff only knew as Ms. Klein, the risk manager. She carried a tablet and wore the expression of someone already thinking 3 crises ahead. "What happened?" Marshall asked without preamble. "Security says the federal government just marched a unit through my emergency room and left with one of my nurses." The charge nurse opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Reed. He cleared his throat. "They came with orders," he said. "Said it was a national security medical operation. They wanted Nurse Hayes for a remote consult with a team overseas." "An entire convoy for a consult," Ms. Klein said skeptically. "They called her by a different name," Maya said before she could talk herself out of speaking. "They called her Seraph." Marshall turned his head slowly. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked. No one answered. In the security office, Delgado's radio crackled with Marshall's request. Within minutes, Marshall and Ms. Klein joined him in front of the monitors. "Run back the last 30 minutes, Marshall said. "All cameras covering the ER." Delgado obliged. The screens filled with familiar images, now slightly unreal, the formation of dark suits at the entrance. The confrontation at the desk, the moment Keene had spoken Nora's call sign. Seraph, the staff clustering at the edges of the frame. Then came the part Delgado had not yet replayed. He slowed the feed when Nora began to walk toward the doors. "Here," he said quietly. On the main monitor, they watched the line of operators straighten. As Keene issued his order, every member of his team brought their right hand up in a crisp salute. Uniforms differed, gear varied, but the salute was the same. Sharp, precise, perfectly timed. At the center of that field of captured stillness stood Nora, scrub top dampened a darker shade, across the shoulders, jump bag strap across her chest. No rank on her collar, no insignia on her sleeves, just a hospital badge and tired eyes. They held the salute for 3 full seconds, then dropped it as one. "Stop," Marshall said. The screen froze. He lowered himself into the nearest chair, as if the strength had gone out of his knees. "I served in the Navy Reserve," he said. His voice was suddenly hoarse. "That is not how you salute a nurse." Ms. Klein stared at the momentum of the captured motion, the vector of bodies all pointed toward the same small figure. "How do you salute a nurse?" she asked. "You do not," he said. "You might nod, maybe shake a hand. That salute is for a field commander, for someone whose decisions decide if the rest of you go home." Silence pooled in the small room. Delgado rubbed a hand over his face. "Security flagged those SUVs as government plates earlier today," he said. "One of them popped a satellite dish. They have been sitting on our property for hours. I thought they were here for a VIP upstairs." "You did not think they were here for a night nurse?" Ms. Klein said. "No," he replied. "I did not." In the ER, word spread without anyone having to make an announcement. It moved on soft footsteps and lowered voices. "She was military," one nurse said near the crash cart storage. "Not just regular. The suits called her Ghost Medic Eclipse, like in those rumors about black programs. The ones you find on conspiracy forums," another said. "Those are all fake." "Are they?" the first replied. Because that did not look fake. In the break room, 2 techs sat in front of the muted television. "She was the one who saved that homeless guy," one said. She stuck her hands in his chest like she had a map in her head. "We gave her hallway patience and mop-up duty," the other said slowly. The realization sat heavy between them. At the medication station, Reed wrote orders with more force than necessary. The pen scratched harshly on the paper. Maya stood across from him, checking doses. Her hands shook just enough to make the glass vials clink. "We had no idea," she said. "Not the point," Reed answered. She looked up. "What is the point, then?" she asked. He kept his eyes on the chart. "We did not listen," he said. "We had someone on the floor who has seen more arterial bleeds than anyone here, and I shut her down in front of a trauma bay because she wore the wrong badge." He signed his name. The loop of his R was jagged. Maya thought of the way he had spoken to Nora after the mesenteric bleed case. "Lucky guess, that is all." She did not argue, Maya said. "That is what makes it worse," Reed replied. As the night wore on, the calls from outside intensified. Administration set up a small room on the 3rd floor as a temporary command center with phones and laptops and a projector. People from legal and public relations gathered around the table while Marshall briefed them on what had happened. No one said the word liability out loud, but it hung there invisible. "We do not say anything about programs we do not understand," Marshall said. "We do not confirm or deny the presence of federal personnel. For now, if anyone asks, a staff member was called to assist in an off-site emergency. That is all." "And when she comes back," Ms. Klein asked. Marshall looked at the frozen image on the projector screen, the salute captured in midair. "Then we have another conversation," he said. He did not sound entirely steady. By morning, the story had already taken shape inside the hospital walls, whether administration liked it or not. The versions varied in detail, but the core did not change. Nurse Hayes is not just a nurse. She was something else once. In the staff lounge, someone had taped a piece of paper to the bulletin board. The paper was white, the writing large and blocky, in black marker. "Ghost Medica's rule, humility, is the highest rank." No one claimed it. No one took it down. People read it, smiled without humor, and went back to their work with the words in the corner of their vision. During the next shift change, Marshall called the entire ER staff who were on duty into a brief huddle at the nurses' station. Monitors still beeped and phones still rang, but for a few minutes, the center of the department held its attention in one place. "I know you are tired," he said. "I know last night was not standard. I will not pretend I have answers for all of it." He glanced toward the doors as if he could still see the taillights of the convoy. "What I do know," he continued, "is that we have people here with histories we do not know and skills we have not used. That is our failure. No one should be treated as less important because they are quiet or because their title on a badge is smaller. Not after what we saw." He looked at the faces circled around him. Nurses, techs, residents, the receptionist, even Delgado leaning on the desk with his arms folded. "From today," Marshall said, "I want a different standard in this department. Respect is not optional, for anyone. I will put it in writing. We will make it policy, but more than that, it needs to be the way we work. You never know who is standing next to you in scrubs." The speech was not long. He did not raise his voice or pound his fist. When he stopped, the only sound for a moment was the rain against the windows and the soft hiss of oxygen. Then people began to nod. A few exchanged glances that carried apology, or at least acknowledgement. Later that week, the education coordinator sent out an email. "Subject new trauma skills sessions. The message offered extra training in advanced airway management field triage principles, hemorrhage control, optional outside regular shifts, unpaid. It was the sort of notice that usually drew a handful of ambitious residents and maybe one or two nurses aiming for promotions. This time the reply list filled fast. Several veteran nurses who had once rolled their eyes at extra classes signed up first. In the comment field, one of them typed a single sentence. If Hayes can do it in a hallway, I can learn to do better in a room. In the break room, the handwritten sign stayed on the board. Someone had underlined the last line and added a small drawing of an IV bag beside it. Hands moved differently in the ER after that. People reached to help stock carts without being asked. They checked in on each other in the hallway between rooms. They watched the monitors more closely, not because they were afraid something dramatic might happen, but because they had been reminded how thin the line was between routine and disaster. The rain outside finally eased into a fine mist. The clouds thinned enough that a faint brightness showed behind them, a softer gray at the edge of the windows. Inside, the emergency department kept its usual pace. New patients came in, old ones went home. Somewhere beyond their walls, in a place no one in the hospital could point to on a map, a different kind of work was being done, through a screen scratched by sand and time. 3 days later, the rain finally softened. It did not stop. This was Seattle, but it had thinned to a gray curtain instead of a solid wall. The drops tapped against the windows instead of slamming into them. The emergency department looked almost ordinary again. The waiting room held a mix of tired parents, restless teenagers, and solitary figures staring at phones. Monitors beeped in their usual offbeat harmony. Coffee steamed in paper cups. Maya stood at the nurse's station, reviewing a lab result. Her eyes kept drifting to the staff entrance. Every time it opened for someone else, her shoulders dropped a fraction. She said she would try the charge, nurse murmured beside her. She did not say when. I know, Maya said. She also knew how many rumors had circulated in 3 days about black programs and secret missions and how far a tablet signal could really reach. None of the rumors mentioned failure. None of them dared. The badge reader at the staff door beeped. The handle turned. Nora stepped through. She wore the same pale blue scrubs. Her hair was tied back in the usual low ponytail. Her ID badge swung gently from her pocket. For a heartbeat, she looked like just another person coming on for a shift. Then the noise in the ER thinned. It was not silence. Patients still coughed. Phones still rang. But the staff noise, the layer of chatter and clatter that usually sat on top of everything, dropped away. One by one, people stood. The nurse at triage pushed back her chair and rose. The tech who had been stacking blankets straightened. A resident in wrinkled scrubs stopped mid-sentence and got to his feet. Even the receptionist stood, her hand still resting on the phone. Nora halted just inside the threshold, caught midway between the door and the station. Her eyes flicked around the room. Every face that belonged to the staff was turned toward her. No one spoke. No one clapped. The gesture was quiet, almost awkward, but it was unanimous. Delgado leaned against the far wall, arms folded. He gave her a small nod, the kind you gave someone who had walked back from a place you understood only by its weight. Dr. Marshall stood at the edge of the group, tie loosened. He nodded once as well, a formal, almost military gesture, though there was no salute in it. Maya felt her throat tighten. She stepped away from the desk and moved toward Nora. Hey, she said softly. Nora let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. It came out a little uneven. Hey, she replied. Up close, the changes showed. Fine lines of fatigue marked the corners of her eyes. There was a hollowness to her cheeks that had not been there before. A faint bruise colored one forearm, the kind you got from leaning too hard against equipment that did not forgive. You look tired, Maya said. Long week, Nora said. How are we doing? The question was so normal it almost broke the spell. Dr. Reed stepped forward, hands in his pockets. He stopped a few feet from her, as if uncertain how close he was allowed. Nora, he said. Her name felt unfamiliar on his tongue, weighted with everything he had learned to associate with it in the last 3 days. I owe you an apology. She looked at him, head tilted slightly. For what, she asked. For every time I cut you off, he said. For every time I assumed you were guessing. For the way I talked to you in that trauma bay. I thought you were overstepping. I thought I knew better because my name had doctor in front of it, and yours did not. He drew a breath. I was wrong, he said. About you. About what you can do. About what it means to be standing in the room when something goes wrong. I am sorry. The words hung there, not rehearsed, not polished. His ears flushed slightly with the effort of saying them in front of half the department. Nora studied him for a moment, then very slowly she smiled. It was small and tired, but it reached her eyes this time. I appreciate that, she said. Truly. But do not respect me because of whatever you think happened out there. She tipped her head toward the windows, toward a world far beyond the gray sky. Respect the people in the hallway, she said. The ones without family at the bedside. The ones without clean clothes. The ones who have been sitting in chairs for 6 hours because there are no beds. Spend more time on them. Listen to them. That is enough for me. Reed swallowed. The knot in his chest loosened a little. I can do that, he said. Good, she answered. Then we are fine. The charge nurse stepped in. You sure you are up for working? She asked. We can float you, give you some time to rest, maybe keep you on lighter cases. I am fine, Nora said. Put me where you need me. The charge nurse hesitated. Hallway is open, she said, and rooms 3 and 4, same as before. Then that is mine, Nora said. She took a clipboard from the counter and began to scan the list of names, pen moving quickly as she made notes. The motion was familiar. The way people watched her while she did it was new. As she turned to head down the corridor, Maya fell in beside her. What was it like, Maya asked quietly, on the other end of that line? Nora's steps did not falter. Loud, she said. Crowded. A lot of dust. Less gear than anyone wanted and more blood than anyone planned on. Did you get them out? Maya asked. Nora did not answer right away. Her jaw tightened briefly. Enough, she said. The word carried weight, but she did not add to it. In the hallway, Jennings lay sleeping, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The woman in the hoodie sat up a little straighter when she saw Nora. The teenage boy with the wrist brace gave her a shy nod and held up his splint like a trophy. Nora returned the nods, checked a monitor, adjusted a blanket. Her hands moved with the same unhurried certainty as always. The morning passed. New patients filled empty slots. The staff found a new balance around the same old tasks. When someone spoke to Nora now, there was an edge of careful respect in the tone. Some of it was admiration, some of it was guilt. She did not seem interested in either. Just after lunch, the receptionist's phone rang again. This time the number on the display did not match any of the media lines or the internal extensions. Emergency department, she said. How can I help you? The voice on the other end was low and even. This is for the front desk only, the caller said. A vehicle will pull up in 2 minutes. The driver will leave an envelope addressed to Nurse Nora Hayes. Please see that she gets it unopened. Who is this? The receptionist asked. There was a brief pause. Someone who owes her a debt, the voice replied. The line clicked off. 2 minutes later, a single black SUV rolled into the loop outside the ER. No siren this time. No lights. Just the quiet growl of a well-tuned engine. Commander Keene stepped out of the passenger side. He wore the same dark coat unbuttoned now. The lines on his face looked deeper in the daylight. He did not come through the automatic doors. Instead, he walked to the reception window and waited for the glass to slide aside. Can I help you? The receptionist asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, he said. He held up a large manila envelope, thick and slightly bent at the corners. It had no government markings, just a name written in neat block letters across the front. Nora Hayes. This is for her, he said. A thank you from 6 people who are very much alive. Please put it somewhere safe until she has a moment. The receptionist took the envelope with both hands. I can call her, she said. No, Keene replied. Let her work. She will find it. He glanced past the glass into the ER. Through the reflection of the windows, he could just make out the shape of Nora, moving between beds, checking charts, adjusting lines. He straightened, then lifted his right hand in a small, precise gesture. It was not the full formal salute from before, just a quick, silent acknowledgement directed at the woman he could barely see. Then he dropped his hand, turned, and climbed back into the SUV. The vehicle pulled away, merging with regular traffic within a block. The receptionist set the envelope on the nurse's station, propped against a stack of charts where Nora would see it. It sat there for nearly an hour. Nora finally noticed it as she came back from taking a set of vitals. Her name on the front pulled her eye. What is that? She asked. Some guy in a black car dropped it, the receptionist said. Said it was for you. Looked official, but there is no logo, just that. Nora picked it up. The paper felt heavy and slightly worn under her fingers. She turned it once, checking the back. No seal, no warning labels. She slid a thumb under the flap and opened it. Inside were 6 smaller envelopes, each one folded from standard printer paper and sealed with a strip of tape. Names were written on the outside of each in different hands. She opened the first. The handwriting inside was messy, the ink smudged. Ma'am, you do not know me, but I know your voice. You kept telling me to breathe, and I did even when I thought I was underwater. They say you were 3,000 miles away. I do not care. You were in the room as far as I am concerned. She read the second. You told me to cut deeper when I was scared I would kill him. You said if you do not go far enough, he dies for sure. I went far enough. He is sleeping in the next bed over right now. Thank you for making me move my hands. The third was shorter. I have a wife who thinks I am on a routine rotation. I will get to keep the lie going a little longer because of you. I never thought I would be grateful for paperwork. Nora's vision blurred for a moment. She blinked until the words cleared again. The fourth, fifth, and sixth each carried their own versions of the same message: gratitude, memory, acknowledgement of something that had happened in a broken building no one in this hospital would ever see. She folded the letters back along their creases and slid them into the main envelope. For a moment, she just held it against her chest, fingers pressed lightly over the paper. Then she slid the bundle into the pocket of her scrub top close to where the eclipse patch rested in its own worn cloth. 2 pieces of fabric, 2 different lives now sharing the same space. Maya approached, saw the look in her eyes, and stopped herself from asking. Some answers did not need words. Nora glanced toward the window. The rain had thinned to the lightest of mists, barely visible against the gray. Beyond the glass, the city moved in its usual pattern. Cars, buses, people with umbrellas. No black SUVs, no satellite dishes, no command perimeters. She breathed in the antiseptic scented air of the ER and let it out slowly. "I choose this," she said almost under her breath. "Choose what?" Maya asked. Nora looked at her. "Showing up," she said. "Here, for them." She tipped her head toward the hallway. A new patient had just been wheeled into the overflow section. A man in his 50s jacket, stained hair, wet from the drizzle. He clutched his side with one hand and stared at the ceiling with the flat, shocked look of someone who had not yet processed what had happened to him. Nora walked to his bedside. She took a pair of gloves from the box, snapped them on. The familiar sound, small and unremarkable, settled her more than any briefing ever had. "Hi," she said, her voice steady. "I am Nora. I will be taking care of you." She placed her hand on his arm, gentle but firm. Warmth moved through her skin into his. His gaze finally shifted from the ceiling to her face. The monitor beside him picked up his pulse and translated it into a soft series of beeps. Outside, the last of the rain ticked against the glass and began to fade. In the bright hum of St. Jude's emergency department, Nora's hands went back to work. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.